So I want a situation where instead of being on his own ship, Albright is on one of the coalition ships, like before they kind of like start to not trust each other so much. So this would be like the big thing after Faye that kind of starts to draw lines in the sand here. So there's a situation or something where they're being fired upon and their ship is losing energy, and the head of the coalition says, his ship, whatever, and Albright's just sort of a passenger, and the captain's like, okay, we have to deploy the Wretch, and then like a hatch or something opens up, and there's like a person sort of like suspended, and they wake up, and then like little electrodes come out and kind of like shock them, and then they scream, and then that like somehow gives the ship power. Like they have somebody, like, I don't know, maybe like the first person that like they've injected Kyanite into or something. And so they have like an actual human that they kind of like are inflicting pain on to act as like a backup generator for the coalition ship. And this could be a situation where like it's the first thing where the coalition does something that's just like beyond the pale messed up.
Welcome to the StarShip Writers Room,
a podcast that gives you an up-close look at the creation of the StarShip universe.
We talk new characters, hash out plot points, and imagine possibilities that are truly out of this world.
and which you might see featured in the Deploy Starship NFT game.
A play-to-earn cryptocurrency game set in outer space.
I'm Melanie, the Starship Lore Champion, and I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow Starship Lore creators,
Shooty Pew Pew, your world builder,
and
Spazzitron of CryptoPhoenix.org. Shooty is not here today. Last time I was not here and he was, and this time I am here and he is not. That's why it's good that we have three people, because different time zones and all that stuff. But yeah, he isn't going anywhere. He will be on the next one. And as far as something that inspired me this week, we had a little one in the hospital for over a week, and seeing her recover has just been, the resilience and all that comes with recovery has been excellent. It's really been just a good feeling to see things go in a good direction.
Oh, that's so good to hear. I'm really glad that she's on the mend. It can be really hard, and I think looking at things, it seems like you're choosing a more positive way to look at it and seeing the resilience and just the power of healing and everything. So yeah, it's really good to kind of, if you can do that, to do that. And then also, but to just meet yourself where you are. And if you're, if everything seems like crap, then seeing it that way too is fine.
Yeah.
It always feels like, it's cool. I'm glad that you're seeing it that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely important to take some time to, if life kicks you in the butt, it's okay to kind of wail about it for a little while, but eventually you gotta get yourself back up and going.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you mentioned that you had an idea that while you guys were in the hospital. So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is for a just a character sort of outside of either so related to all these characters, but a non-coalition member simply called the Wretch, which is a captive human that has been altered using Kyanite via injection or some method, which is being used by the coalition in terrible ways as a living battery. This is being accomplished by keeping them sedated, and then in an emergency where you need backup power, they're being resuscitated and then tortured electronically, which is generating emergency backup power for a coalition vessel of some sort. That's sort of where I am at now. It's not quite hammered out, but yeah.
So tell me how this works. So you said they were injected with Kyanite. The human, the Wretch, is used as fuel now that they've been injected with this. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the idea, obviously, this is going to draw a line in the sand between the Albright company and the coalition proper, because as he witnesses this, this cannot be allowed to go on. I want to eventually sort of have the Wretch be removed or rescued, and it would offer just a different body style, because as I see these NFTs coming out, there is a bit of similarity, because they're all sort of they all have to be bipedal, and they're all, but So I kind of imagine them being permanently damaged by this procedure. So perhaps they're like in a mech suit of some sort afterward, maybe like a wheelchair where they're like kind of on like life support sort of things, but their broken physical appearance could kind of masks their power level a bit, because they do still have a terrifying power. If it can power a ship, just a human body that could power a ship could have some crazy combat skills or something of that nature.
So they are like originally humans.
Yes, I see. Much like Faye was used for testing in less than humane ways, this is like another byproduct of that sort of testing.
I see. So they're basically humans injected with Kyanite, and then this kind of turns them superhuman. And instead of, using them for whatever those powers might be, they're using them as fuel for their ships.
Yeah. And not this is not like a wide scale thing. This is like a single instance for maybe like the main coalition battle thing or whatever, that's there's like one ship, and this could be a recurring theme, right? Because we have Faye, who had some dodgy, she was literally used to see if someone could survive in one of these ships, and then you can have this sort of thing, and this could be just like a trickling. I want the first two, obviously Faye and the Wretch, to be like have positive outcomes, but you could have one that has been so messed up that they're irredeemable and they have to be like destroyed in a unfortunate sort of thing. Like every few story arcs, it could be like, oh no, we found this other experiment that the coalition was doing. Like there could be stuff where you're exploring planets and doing stuff like that, but then you could occasionally have like a sort of like an X-Files, if you will, episode where it's a leaked coalition experiment.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of like unravels in a way where with Faye, it was kind of argued like this is necessary. We have to see if we can go beyond this world. And then you just start to see as it unravels that it's like really questioning what is necessary. How far do we push the boundary of decency, also quality of life and power imbalances?
Yeah, and while the Faye line is sort of, there's like you said, it's ambiguous. It's like, okay, there's arguments that had to be done. This would be a step past that. Like this was just done for funsies because they could. We've got this little orphan kid that no one's going to miss. Like, let's see what we can do with, like if we want to go down like a coalition bad line, or even like a branch within the coalition, this would be a step in that direction.
Okay, and this really is, like you said, the breaking point.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they kind of break away from the coalition, and there is that separation. That's really interesting too, because kind of the coalition represents Earth in a way, like especially the destructive powers. So it's quite interesting, like in terms of kind of symbolism for home or like family of origin and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And it could also, because I pronounce his name, I think it's Kari is how his name is pronounced, the one that's like the head of the council, because he's distinctly good. So this could be going around, this could be even above him, and you could have more situations, because and it's cool because his character's sort of stuffy. Like I kind of debated on it would start off as like a light thing, because the idea of having Albright and Michael like literally being court-martialed as they're taking off because they tell the coalition to eat it. So like I kind of thought that would be funny. But then and so Kari doesn't like that, obviously, because it's like, oh, these guys should be more professional and respectful. But then he's gonna be put in an odd place where he's like, oh shoot, like these guys are kind of crazy, but they're not bad, and coalition is like bad. So it could open up more bigger stories, more political drama, stuff like that. And the character of the Wretch could be really cool from the NFT and artwork side of it, right? Because it's just like a little, I kind of pictured like a kid, just sort of like a kid, but like it could be a kid in a wheelchair that can like lift buildings with their mind power or whatever. It could be an interesting sort of a situation. And it could even be like maybe the suit that they have like going forward, okay, they get rescued, whatever, and they have a suit, but the suit's actually just to like tamper down their power. And you could have a situation where like they're getting attacked and somebody's like, oh, not so tough now, I broke your helmet, and it's like the helmet was to protect you from me, not me from you.
Yeah. Maybe the
Yeah.
suit is even a way for the coalition to like enforce some kind of control.
Yeah, well, I don't want the person, like, my thought is just the person sort of like, they say, oh shoot, we have to deploy the Wretch, and then like a wall comes down and they're just like shackled to the wall basically. And I was thinking maybe the suit is something that Pan gives to her, like as part of like when they rescue her, like, okay, well, she literally can't survive her, their organs don't work because of the kyanite stuff. So like it's like a life support suit that they kind of have to put together, but it could be multifaceted. It could look cool. There could be different, if we wind up going with a sort of a game where that's more combat oriented, it could be like parts swapped out, sort of like how Faye is able to with Pan, swap out bits and pieces. It could be it could go a billion different ways. I haven't quite figured out the scenario for Albright discovering this really, or how they can be rescued, unless we want to do like a tragic one where they can't. Yeah, it could really, there's a lot there that I've kind of been milling over for the last little bit here. And you can do more with it, right? Because it's not based on an actual person. Like we can't have, it's Arc 1 Albright's character gets exploded, But we have more room with this because no one's gonna get too upset.
So our questions are how is this discovered? What is the fallout? Is the person rescued? Is it safe to rescue them? There's like that moral dilemma of, because they're so powerful, it's like we don't know what the capability is.
So my idea so Albright's already in trouble because he rescued Faye. He wasn't supposed to. So like as punishment for 90 days or whatever, he can't use his ship. He has to act as second mate to the more corporate head of the coalition. So he's not on his ship, and something bad happens, and they're like, oh shoot, and he's like, oh, what are we gonna do? And they no problem, fire up the Wretch. And then he just sees like this little wall come down, and there's like a kid sort of like suspended, and sees them start to wake up, and then sees like them get electrocuted, and then the ship is like max power, and he's like, what in the world? And they just say, never mind, just ignore it. So that could be how it's discovered. And then maybe once he gets his own ship back, he decides to cross the Rubicon, and whether he actually forcibly boards the ship with the help of, because Faye owes him a favor at this point. So maybe he, contacts Faye and gets to her help, and then she gets the Ronin to help. So it's sort of like a big Avengers moment where they are able to take the ship and rescue the Wretch. At that point, because Pan would sort of begrudgingly go with him, he could be like, oh my God, she's going to die in like 20 minutes, and like throw a little apparatus together for her. And that could be super tense. And at that point, she gets to decide like, what does she want to hang out with Albright, or does she want to go with Faye for a little bit? Like it could just be sort of like a person that you see all over the place. And I like when they're making the suit, maybe she's sort of losing consciousness as Pan is putting the suit together, and she starts to wake up just for a second, and then like she sees her captor and just looks at him, and he's just like eviscerated, like invisibly. And I'm like, oh shoot, this person's really strong. We need to figure out a way to like help dial their power down.
Oh, like she sees her captor and she just
like unwillingly, just like she just looks at him and he just like explodes, like sort of like, oh shoot, like it's still a kid, and they've just been in like this thing for like a couple of years, just kind of like sitting there. And the end goal would be like, well, she is clearly capable of powering a ship. Why not have her just power her own ship? And so like, because it's different, right? Like if she's a willing battery for her own vessel, it could be like a sort of a, like once we put her in mech suits and put her in fancy wheelchairs, then I think the goal would be to have her, she's her own little person who can have her own stories and powers her own ship. And that would be like sort of how I saw this going for when we have arcs where there's lots of main characters at once. I like the idea of her keeping the name Wretch even after being liberated.
Yeah, like reclaiming it.
Yeah. Because I think that would be fun, because it's sort of like a gross, like a horrible thing to call somebody, but like sort of a la that show, was it Game of Thrones? Yeah, Game of Thrones.
Yes,
is
that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Also, Final Fantasy VII, there's a character called Red 13 who decides to keep his slave name even after. So I thought that would be interesting. Yeah, that's sort of that's what's been bouncing around in my noggin.
Awesome. I did think of something when you were talking about the discovery and like Albright being sent to this ship, and it could be that Kari makes that arrangement. So he is actually like, this is your punishment. And he doesn't know what's happening. So then when it's discovered, so first of all, like maybe his higher ups who do know would not have sent Albright to the ship. But because he's just kind of dealt with this, he doesn't know what's going on. And he's like, oh, this seems like a fair punishment. And then when Albright actually discovers it, he is horrified, and he maybe assumes like there's a moment or a period of time where he's really livid with Kari because he thinks that he knew about it.
Yeah, that could be drama. If we could go all the way to like he thinks there might be a conspiracy, and then he finally like feels brave enough to ask Kari like at gunpoint, and Kari's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what are you like? Or we could have it be something as easy as like, oh, because he's being punished, all of his communications, he can't talk to Kari. He can only talk to the guy that's like his keeping an eye on him. It happens to be the bad guy. So yeah, it could be, depending on how simple or complex we want to go. The coalition, like we want it to be like sort of like dubious. Like there's people within the coalition that are doing messed up stuff, but but not like this entire federation is like rotten from the head up. So like there's a lot that could be done.
I do really like the idea of Albright being unable to talk to Kari and actually tell him what's going on, because, and kind of what you were saying about there are some good people in the coalition. It really reminds me of how in politics you can have some politicians who, win in it for all the right reasons, and then you have others who seem like their only interest is in power. So it feels very much like inspired by this kind of temptation of like you go in to serve the people and then you get a taste of power, and how does that change you if it does?
Yeah.
But I really like the idea of like Albright is not able to talk to Kari, and then months pass before he actually gets to confront him. And by then his mind is already made up that Kari knew about it, and he's pissed. I think it should be a very tense moment where Albright is like questioning everything, and he kind of maybe even looks like a madman, and then Kari seeing it and being like, you're totally spiraling. What is going on? And then he kind of reveals what he saw, as like, what, like you, of course you knew about this, and then something big would have to happen to like make Albright trust that Kari didn't know about this. But he finally, like after that huge tense climax, finally realizes that like that wasn't it, that Kari did not.
Yeah. And I kind of imagined the decision to not rescue Faye as being from Kari, because that is like a defensible position. Like, no, this is a felon. We're not going to risk our people to go rescue a felon. And so like because that is a defensible position, but that would also give a reason for there to be tension between Kari and Albright.
Yeah. I think it could even be it could even be very pragmatic, like maybe Kari is like, just based on our resources, this Faye rescue mission just is not a priority. Just like kind of a very, very sensible, pragmatic character that makes those really difficult decisions, but for the greater good. It's kind of the moral question of, do you like rescue 8 people? What is that, like the trolley?
The trolley problem. Yeah.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. So he feels, it feels to me like it could be that he makes a decision more rooted in logic, and maybe this is part of his character development, that he becomes a little more, human to for lack of a better word, and then and maybe this is part of what helps him, is because Albright could even mistake him for being such a person that he would have knowledge of these activities and allowed them to continue or be party to them in any way, I think can be like a real wake-up call for him.
Yeah. Anything we can do to kind of bulk out characters that aren't really touched on in the first arc is a good thing. Because there's a lot, because I tried to keep the story, like the general plot of the first arc as simple as possible to avoid confusion and just to get something rolling. Like some characters got missed that that could be included later.
Yeah, definitely. So now we talk about the Wretch, I would propose, and what happens post rescue, and like what are the conflicts that they run into, and how do they ultimately arrive, if they do, at the decision to let her be the head of her own ship, especially like what age is she that she's leading her own ship, and how does maybe her new powers help her do that? Because it's really, reminds me of like growing up too fast as well, and like she's still a kid, but is she, because of all of her experiences?
It's tough, right? Because the end result that I wanted was for her to so Pan doesn't live on a planet, he lives on a moon that he's kind of converted to a store. So like they might say like, okay, and plus Pan is an android. So I kind of thought it'd be like, okay, well, until we get this sorted out, we're gonna park her with Pan, and then over time you could even have an arc that's just like, sort of like how the Fae and the Ronin is more of like it's an arc, but it's just like little one pagers. Oh, they do this. Oh, they do that. Like you could have the Wretch have to help Pan with his store, and just different customers come in and learning like, oh, because that could be, because like you said, just growing up too fast. This would be like a much more slow, much more chill sort of situation, and just give her like a place that we can have a less action oriented arc, right? Because it's just her over the course of time, learning about people and learning about how people interact and being taken care of instead of manipulated, and just sort of give her like a coming of age arc, especially after we're doing all these like political stuff and action stuff. We could have like a little coming of age arc that just focuses on the Wretch post rescue.
I love that. And I love that she is so powerful, and it can be really fun to play with like visitors to the store, maybe taking her for granted or overlooking or underestimating her. And, I can imagine like a robbery, an attempted robbery at the store. And then she's just like, oh, actually, I'm super powerful. You're going down.
Yeah, and at the beginning we could even have because that could be played off funny, which you have to add levity to this, because this is essentially like an abused orphan. Like we have to like, that's not a fun read. But you could even, because Pan's a robot, you could have situations where like they're talking about something and it's like a heartfelt moment, and then like her glasses fall off and like she blows one of his legs off or something, and you could do, because he's an android and because it's like remote, you could have her accidentally go off a few times and without having like actual repercussions. So there's a lot of different things you could do.
I was thinking too of like her first crush.
Oh God.
See that?
We could do, and again, because you've written more, I guess you've written actual stories as opposed to me who's written like blurbs. I think this would be like an excellent use of your skills and background.
Well, I am excited. I'm excited to see her like reconnect with kind of quote unquote normal human experiences, if that makes sense. Like emotions, like nervousness, why does this whatever make me so nervous whenever I see them, and maybe like also just making a friend. Even the relationship with Pan, I think, is going to be really sweet. And Pan, like you said, he's an android, so he's a little more durable than the average person. So it's like a nice little practice ground for her to really harness her power.
Yeah, and also because Pan sort of rescued Faye out of the vacuum of space and got like, because he's a robot and he doesn't know he's like pokes her inappropriately or something, and she snapped at him. Like now, yeah, and now he is he know like, so you don't have like so now he's sort of understands how like human women are a little bit like more than he did before. So this would give him a chance to like this, because this is his second go. There could be jokes about that, like what am I doing? Why am I on female rescuing detail? And he's because like in stories that there's, because he's a robot, so like a lot of the weird dynamics of that are kind of removed. So yeah, it could be and like there's a lot of room to go. The arc could even end with I was able to reverse engineer the stuff that they were using on you to have you power their ship, and I've made you your own ship, like how he did for Faye, sort of. And so that could be cool. And so it could have like a nice bow on it for the end.
Yeah, that's really sweet, like gaining her autonomy and independence.
Yeah. And again, you can still have her be because even like once she's like more stable, like she's still a teenager, so like you could still play into that for like for laughs and drama later on.
And how old do you think she is by the time she's with Pan on the moon?
Yeah, well, you could be super vague on it because there's no records, but you just have her like young teens or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But she's essentially like a kidnapped orphan, so like you could even have like Pan kind of issue her a birthday or something.
Oh, that's cute. With parents, do you think there are any other parental figures for her that would come to be?
No, because I mean that's like kind of why she was kidnapped, is because she doesn't have any next of kin, any next of anything.
And what about like people who adopt that role? Like, is there something there with Faye potentially that like she develops a soft spot for this person or anyone else really? Because I just see that because they're a really young person, would there be any adults that could act as those parental figures, or maybe even like just kind of reference points for what an adult is, that isn't like this torturous, enslaving, horrible person?
It would be kind of funny to have a situation where maybe like Faye can't use her ship for a little bit, and so she has to kind of be with Albright, even though they're sort of opposites, because one, because Albright, he is a coalition person. He does have like some sort of respect for the law and stuff, and Faye does not at all. And so you could kind of force the situation if you wanted to make it funny and stupid, like where Faye and Matt, would be kind of like having to act like the odd couple to kind of like encourage the Wretch to, but you could just have her like, once she gets stable, sort of go off and just sort of have this wild child who's a little bit kooky because she hasn't really been socially adjusted. Either one of those could be cool.
Yeah, she doesn't have to have like those, it could just be that Pan satisfies that, and she's already grown up a lot because of everything she's been through. But I think that could also be a story of her letting other people in and healing her wounds in relation to other people, if that makes sense.
It would make more sense from a writing standpoint if we're going to have anybody fill that role afterward. Like maybe she gets into some trouble and Faye has kind of been like keeping an eye on her, because they have not similar backstories, but they're female humans kind of forced to do stuff against their will. Like they could kind of, I think that would make the most sense.
Yeah, that like maybe Faye is just someone, maybe like a reluctant mentor or something, Yeah,
because now it would be funnier to have Albright and Faye trying to argue about how to raise this kid, but it would make more sense and have more, you could do more with it to just have Faye kind of intervene on her behalf a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And just have her be like, even as arcs continue, she's going to be like kind of poorly adjusted. Much like how the chemist, we have him have some problems. Like he's has, because his whole race got yeeted. So like, some problems don't have just like okay, you're permanently better now. So like, yeah, there's no one's like, she's going to have permanent neurodivergence problems, and that's okay. We could just, I kind of like leaving her a little bit broken still.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if there were parents for her anywhere.
But I like that. I like what you said, a reluctant mentor. I like that we can, so she's not completely alone in the world.
Yeah, because I don't really see Faye as a maternal person, but I see their similarities and how they could potentially be drawn to each other. Maybe like more of a sister relationship.
Yeah, like a big sister situation. I think that would be the perfect way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, we don't like, no one wants to see a character just have a bad time all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that would be, I like that idea. I think that's the most sensible way to do it.
Hello, StarShip Writers Room listener. I am just dropping in to say that we are splitting this episode into two. So Spazzitron and I just had an excellent writers room session, and it just ended up being extremely long. Here we completely shift gears and start talking about creature creation. So I thought it was a really good place to stop for this week. Let us know what you think of the Wretch storyline and any suggestions you might have for it. And as ever, we want to close this episode with a community shout out. And this week we are welcoming back Lucas, who you might remember from episode 4's community shoutouts. He had some great suggestions for the gas planet. And this time he's back submitting a piece of music that he wrote, a song called The Prayers of Mankind. You can find this in our description box below, or you can try searching the name of the YouTube channel, which is Top Drawer Digital, or you can try searching Lucas The Prayers of Mankind. I don't know why you would do all that, because we've linked it in the description box, but maybe at this point you're not listening on YouTube, so that's how you find it. And I just want to say again, thank you so much, Lucas, because when I received your email with this tune, I was in our infinity, it felt like, of editing the pod, and I accepted it as an invitation to have a dance break, and it served me very well. So thank you so much. And yeah, this is just a perfect reminder that whatever you are thinking of contributing, whether it's a piece of music, whether it's a voice note, a doodle, a drawing, a thought, an article that you found, please, please, please send it through. We would love to see what lights you up, what inspires you, what you imagine the Starship universe looks like.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of StarShip Writers Room.
If you have an idea for the Starship lore, we would love to hear it, and you might even get a shout out on the pod.
Simply send to lore@deploystarship.com. That's LORE@deploystarship.com.
We hope you have a stellar day,
And we'll see you next week.